When judges are smeared as communists and their families targeted with death threats, it's not politics, it's a war on democracy. This isn't dissent, it's fascism with a MAGA flag.
Michelle, I wanted to ask you about some of the threats we're seeing on the judiciary, but let me preface it by quoting the president, who has called federal judges who rule against him communists. He's called them lunatics. He's called them monsters. He has said that they hate the United States. Of course, he called for the impeachment of Judge Boasberg, said the court system is radicalized and incompetent. His advisor, Stephen Miller, has threatened to suspend the writ of habeas corpus if judges essentially don't fall in line. And as a result, we're seeing judges' lives threatened and their family members' lives threatened. Let me start with the threshold question in terms of a president making these personal attacks on judges for ruling against him, or the policies against the policies of the administration. Have we any experience in our history with this? I mean, there have been presidents, of course, who've been deeply disappointed in judges they've appointed, and of course, many of these judges ruling against Donald Trump or people appointed by Donald Trump. But have we ever seen a president make these kind of sustained and personal attacks on members of the judiciary?
Senator, look, I would say that obviously tension between, sometimes very heated tension between elected officials and judges, presidents and judges who rule against them is nothing new. But I agree with you that there is something different about the tenor of the rhetoric that we are hearing today. And I think that some of the specific suggestions, and maybe I'll offer a couple of examples. One, I do think that including family members of judges in the attacks on judges' rulings is something that, to my knowledge, we have not previously seen members of public office engage in. The proposals to impeach, right? So there's been rhetoric, but also actual resolutions introduced in the House to impeach federal judges for the substance of their rulings is also something that I don't think we've seen. We've obviously impeached federal judges before. That's a constitutional remedy for very serious misconduct, bribery, corruption. Obviously, if the judges engage in treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, impeachment is the remedy. But we've never seriously entertained the possibility of impeaching judges for the substance of their rulings. And so I do think that those threats represent sort of a new escalation that is deeply concerning.
Well, I would certainly agree. I tried one of those judicial impeachment cases of a judge named Porteous, and it was for bribery and other like serious offenses. Certainly not for upholding the law or the Constitution or having a different view of the law or Constitution than a president. In terms of the family members, it's not just the president's criticism, but at least while he was serving as a special employee, Elon Musk was pushing out these threats against members of the Judge Boasberg's family, I think tweeting out or retweeting content identifying who the children are or where they work. And that is just amplifying the danger to these family members. Tell us a little bit about this phenomenon now of people sending pizzas to judges and the implicit threat in that.
Well, I mean, I think it's this is also something that I don't think we've seen before, right? There is clearly some kind of coordinated effort to seek to intimidate federal judges and their families by sending pizzas, communicating the message that their residents, their addresses are known. And some of the pizzas bear the name of the murdered son of District Judge Esther Salas from New Jersey. And the message there, I think, is a very clear one of very serious threat, and I think judges are taking that threat, and the marshals are as well, from the reporting that we've seen, very seriously.
And last question, if you could help Professor put this in a broader context for us, because this attack on judges and the judiciary isn't happening in isolation. We've seen the president now turn on Leonard Leo because these ultra-conservative Federalist Society-approved judges are not proving too right-wing enough for the president. But this comes in the context of the administration also going after law firms. It seems very much a part of a concerted effort to attack the rule of law and using the law to defend people's rights. Tell us a little bit about the broader context.
I do think that attacks on judges and attacks on law firms are of a piece. They seem designed to seek to neutralize sources of countervailing authority and opposition to this administration. And if law firms can't take on unpopular causes because they are scared to run afoul of the president, and if judges are scared to rule against the president, then we really have lost any meaningful check on a president. And as I said in my opening remarks, I think if the Constitution is committed to a single principle, it is limits on power, right? No absolute power. And I worry that we are on a path toward few, if any, meaningful limits on the president.
Let's be clear. This isn't just political rhetoric. It's psychological warfare against the judiciary. Trump has graduated from name-calling to full-blown stochastic terrorism. When the President of the United States calls judges monsters and communists, he is authorizing violence. When Elon Musk, yes, the tech billionaire playing fascist fanboy, tweets personal information of judges' children, that's not free speech. It's targeted intimidation. What kind of regime threatens judges with pizza boxes bearing the names of murdered children? This is not America. It's a fascist fever dream in MAGA cosplay. Trump and his circle aren't just attacking rulings, they're delegitimizing the entire judicial branch. Why? Because it dares to function as a check on his lawlessness. If this continues, we'll soon see judges forced into silence, or worse, exile. This is Trump's vision of justice. Obey or be destroyed. Now buckle up, because in part 2, the GOP's top legal minds twist themselves into pretzels trying to defend hypocrisy with a straight face. Spoiler, it doesn't end well.
Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and they have been abused.
Wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait,
no.
So your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
Is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction
issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge
What
divisions
is the
are a problem.
principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential consideration.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure, colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
and why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think that's
what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who are
you're
injured.
not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I
right?
think that...
I mean, when it's
believe,
Biden, it's okay.
No.
When it's Biden, oh, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's, oh, no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I
it's
believe
just
in
like
a
that
powerful...
book that,
no.
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is this the same
I believe
thing?
in a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What is the principle?
Power.
What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart, the Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit strange?
A very plausible explanation, Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think
you must
this
concede that
was
as a
never
possibility.
used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually.
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator.
like
and the 1960s is where some scholars locate the beginning
Can you
of this.
identify
But
one
others,
before then?
Mila Sahoni, who's another scholar of universal injunction, suggests 1913 is actually the first, and others in the 20s.
The Republic endured for 150 years before there was a nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are
Is
no
that
meaningful
blind?
constraints on the president is a very dangerous system
That's
of law.
not what you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was
every president
You
is
said that is
constrained
not what
and
you
must
said.
be.
You said it was
Absolutely.
a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
Supreme
when Joe
Court Senator
Biden was
agreed
president. Wait a minute.
9-0 with me on
you
that
also
case,
said
to
when
be
Joe
clear.
Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed.
Wait,
and the combination of parties without standing and the single-judge division.
No. We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
issued in a case
we can
where
go
no
round
one
and
had
round on this.
standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes, and Senator Kennedy had you for 6 or 7. You couldn't identify a single principled basis. We all know the truth here, which is it's not just you. It's most of my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, who I respect a great deal, and they were raising very principled objections to the nationwide injunction just 6 months ago, maybe 9 now. And you're probably right. My point is that all that's changed in 9 months is the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I realize that my colleagues on this side of the aisle very much dislike that individual, and I realize that you think that the rulings that he has lost are fundamentally sound. We might grant all of that. I disagree with all of that, but we can put that to one side. The question we're talking about here is, should judges, single judges, district court judges, be able to bind non-parties who are not in front of them? And you used to say no, now you say yes. Let's be consistent. I would just suggest to you our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I briefly respond?
Sure.
I mean, you invoked democracy a couple of times there, Senator. Judges are part of our system of democracy. Democracy is not as simple as majority rule. Judges have always served something of a
You would have it be as simple as
function.
majority rule. When you get the majority you like, you're for the nationwide injunction. When you don't, you're not.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give you the opportunity that I often found absolutely precious when I was arguing before panel judges and couldn't get my answer out. I'm going to give you some of my time to just say what you were going to say to Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Senator.
Can't interrupt you.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
I'll take some of your time.
I started to say
And he
this.
and I, by the way, we're good friends, so it's not personal.
Well, maybe I'll just finish what I started saying at the end, which is in a number of the questions today, there has been this embedded premise that there's something democratically troubling about judges issuing these nationwide injunctions, constraining the democratically elected president. And I guess I would just say in response that, we have a constitutional democracy, so the people are sovereign, and that's, the sovereignty flows from the people, and we do choose our elected representatives, but obviously we choose our representatives in Congress. Congress passes statutes, the president signs them, and many of the rulings we are talking about were predicated on executive branch violations of statutes that Congress passed. So the rulings in many ways are about protecting and reinforcing democracy. And then finally, I'll say that, courts are part of our democracy, right? They have served this rights protecting and democracy facilitating function from basically the beginning, whatever the original design of the Constitution was. And it is not undemocratic or anomalous for courts to sometimes strike down acts of the president or of Congress when they conflict with the fundamental law, which is the Constitution, which in our system, courts have long had the primary role in enforcing.
And in fact, just as a footnote to this conversation, Congress has an obligation to follow the Constitution too, correct?
Absolutely. The president does, Congress does, every official, state and federal takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, but where that oath does not appear to be fully honored by one or more other actors in government. Sometimes courts do need to step into the breach. I think that is what we have been seeing.
And I can't remember exactly what that chart said, but so far in the lawsuits that have been brought, the administration or the president has lost, I would say, a vast majority of times. Is that correct?
The vast majority, yes, Senator.
Senator Josh Hawley, a man who fist bumps insurrectionists, wants to lecture anyone on democracy? Spare us. His entire argument boils down to this: nationwide injunctions are only bad when they apply to Republicans. He nitpicks, quotes from Professor Shaw out of context, twisting them into some mythical liberal hypocrisy. But here's what Hawley ignores: Trump's administration routinely violated the law. That's why they lost so often in court. And yes, when judges rule against that lawlessness, it affects everyone, because executive power doesn't exist in a vacuum. The real hypocrisy? Republicans like Hawley cheering nationwide injunctions when it blocked Biden's student debt relief, but crying foul when it stops Trump from putting kids in cages. This isn't about legal principle. It's about raw partisan control over the judiciary. Professor Shaw remains poised, firm, and honest while Hawley flails in Fox News soundbites. The takeaway? Republicans fear the courts because they fear accountability. Let's not sugarcoat it. The modern Republican Party, under Trump's cultish grip, is systematically attacking the one branch of government that refuses to bow to his delusions, the judiciary. From death threats masked as pizza deliveries to Elon Musk's grotesque doxing of judges' children, this isn't debate, it's intimidation. It's the mafia in a red tie, using social media and hearings to send a message: rule our way or face ruin. Hawley and his ilk aren't interested in principles. Their only concern is shielding their dear leader from legal consequences by any means necessary. And when that means questioning the legitimacy of courts, demonizing judges, and weaponizing public opinion against the very concept of checks and balances, they do it with glee. Professor Shaw gave them more grace than they deserved. But the American people are watching, and what we see is chilling. A desperate, radicalized GOP trying to gut the legal system to keep a wannabe tyrant out of prison. If that doesn't alarm you, it should. If you believe the courts must stay independent, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Truth matters, and we'll keep bringing it right here on Malcolm Varon Hearing.